Welcome back. Welcome back to another edition. Welcome back to another edition of Get Well Acadiana.
Perfect.
All right, cool.
Whenever you're ready, you can go and I'm going to close the door.
All right, sounds good, man.
Turn the...
Yeah. That'll be good. Thank you, brother.
There we go. No problem, man.
Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. Thank you for joining me on this fine Saturday morning. Thursday night, we did our brain health workshop, and it was such a huge success. And before we get started today, I just wanted to thank everybody that attended. You know, we were able to improve so many lives and prevent so many people that are having problems with their brain health. We had everything from depression to bipolar disorder, anxiety, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. I mean, we had so many people with so many different brain health concerns, and I just wanted to thank everybody that came, and I'm so excited to be able to play such an important role in getting you all healthy and able to affect the health of your brain in such a positive way. So I wanted to thank everybody for coming, and thank you all for joining me today. We're going to change gears and do something a little bit different on the show today. You know, on almost every show I've been doing since coming to KPEL on my Saturday morning show here, I've talked about the destructive effects that these environmental chemicals are having on our body. And when I say that, I feel that people don't really get the depth of what I mean. I think that our audience members aren't really understanding how severe this is to our health. And the reason that I talk about this so much is, guys, I truly feel that this is one of the biggest health challenges of our generation. It's so much more important than you know. The destructive effects that these chemicals are having on our health is one of the largest health challenges over the next 2 or 3 decades. And why is that? Well, what are some of the top things that people have? Cancer, heart disease, diabetes, hormone and thyroid problems, attention deficit, some of these mental or emotional type disturbances. Guys, this is where all this stuff's coming from. So I wanted to attempt to explain that just a little bit more today. And so I'm going to dedicate an entire show to these chemicals and what they do to our health. So in future shows, whenever I talk about the destructive effects that chemicals are having on us, you can understand a little bit more about what I mean by that. So whenever I say that the average American eats 14 pounds of harmful toxins and chemicals every single year, that doesn't resonate with people. So if you can imagine when you were younger, Mom used the big box of Tide soap. You know, the big box of washing powder with the handle on top? It's the biggest box they have. That's about 12.5 pounds. So imagine that if I brought one of those to your house for each one of your children, one for you and one for your spouse, with some spoons. And I said that you need to spoon feed this box of soap to your child this year. And next year, I'm going to bring you another one and another one and another one year after year after year for each family member. Would you do that? Well, it's already happening. The truth is that's already taking place. We are bombarded by a chemical onslaught every single day. People don't realize the truth is you're exposed to more chemicals from the time that you wake up in the morning until the time that you leave your house, just from the time you wake up till you leave, than what our ancestors were in their entire lifetime. In just that few hours, you're exposed to more chemicals than our ancestors were in their entire lives. So when you wake up in the morning, I'm going to give you an example. When you wake up in the morning, you get up from your mattress that's probably been coated with fire-retardant chemicals, and it's been made with foam that releases chemicals. It off-gases chemicals that have been proven to cause hormone disruptions and mental problems and diabetes. And then you step out of bed onto your carpeting, and that carpeting has been coated with a stain-resistant chemicals called perfluorinated chemicals that have been proven to cause diabetes and obesity. And then you get a drink of water that contains fluoride and chlorine and arsenic and many other unknown chemicals and probably some heavy metals and unknown pharmaceutical residues and toxins. And then you have a cup of coffee that contains pesticides. And if you use a plastic cup, it's probably releasing a chemical called BPA into your coffee. And BPA is a real nasty chemical that I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And then you have breakfast, which if it's cereal is loaded with GMO products and pesticides and preservatives. Or you have some other microwavable breakfast that's loaded with food preservatives and colorings. Or worse, you go through the drive-thru, which is nothing but chemicals and preservatives. Or worse than that, you have a Pop-Tart that again is nothing but chemicals and food colorings. And then you take a shower and the water's absorbed into your skin. And then you use soaps and shampoos that contain phthalates and sulfides, proven to cause anxieties and ADDs. And then you put on your dry clean shirt, which is loaded with harmful chemicals from the dry cleaning, or you put on one of these fire retardant suits like the guys wear at the plants. Again, that's a fire retardant chemical. Oh, wait, there's a knock at your door. It's the exterminator. He's come to spray chemicals all over your house. And then before you leave, you clean your kitchen counter with chemicals. And then, oh, well, since you're having company that night, you decide to spray air freshener, which is nothing but harmful hormone disrupting chemicals. Guys, this is before you ever leave your house. We're exposed to more chemicals before we ever leave our house in the morning than our ancestors were in their entire lifetime. And I'm telling you guys, you need to pay attention to this because these chemicals are doing really severe damage to our health. And it's because they build up in our body with a cumulative effect. Of course, these things won't hurt you in one day. They're not going to make you sick once. But when you add up this chemical onslaught day after day, hour by hour, these chemicals building up in our body and they're making us sick. And our body has the ability to detoxify itself, but not from all of this. It was not designed to cleanse ourselves from this chemical onslaught that we're having in today's society. Our body's detoxification systems are completely overwhelmed. So if you look at the health problems that just 10 people you know, just think of 10 of your friends and think of the health problems that they have. Do you know anybody that has diphtheria or tuberculosis? No, we know people that have thyroid problems, hormone imbalances, obesity, diabetes, depression, anxiety, attention deficit disorder, and cancer. Well, if you look at that list of diseases, and if you look at the side effects of the most common chemicals in our society today, those two lists match. This is where all this stuff is coming from. You know, 50 years ago, we hardly heard of anyone that had thyroid disorders. Well, 50 years ago, milk came in a glass bottle. Now everything's plastics and packaged and processed and preserved with chemicals. And I'm here to tell you today, these chemicals are a huge contributor to all of today's worst health problems. And you know, two researchers recently looked at this and they've come to the same conclusion. And, you know, honestly, I'm glad they're finally catching on. I've been saying this stuff for 20 years. That happens to me all the time. You know, a couple of Harvard researchers will come up with something that I've been talking about for 20 years and they're the smart ones. That's okay. At least they're catching on. And so these two researchers are finally calling attention to how disruptive these chemicals are to their health. And I'm really glad they're finally catching on to this, but these are no slouches. One of them is Dr. Philip Grandjean. He's from the Harvard School of Medicine. And then the other one that studied this is Dr. Landrigan from Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. So, you know, these are no slouches. And they reviewed hundreds of studies and released their opinion. And they've really sounded the alarm on how destructive the chemicals we're exposed to every day are to our health. I mean, they just could have called me, but this was their statement. The chemicals in our surrounding are making us sick. Humans are using more chemicals than ever before, and these chemicals are not even required to be tested before they are put in our surroundings. There are literally thousands of environmental chemicals used in our homes, our food, our agriculture, and our clothing, and our water, and they're damaging us and damaging our children. So all I have to say about that's welcome to the game, guys. I'm glad you're finally catching on. These doctors are calling for a global prevention strategy for these chemicals, and I could not agree more. But here's the truth, guys. That's not going to happen anytime soon. This is up to you. There's just too much money in selling these chemicals. These are some of the largest companies in the world. They honestly have too many politicians in their pocket, and they donate too much money to get these politicians elected. So you're not going to see any big uproar over this in Washington. They'd rather talk about carbon dioxide emissions. But the truth is, the real environmental tragedy is what these chemicals are doing to our health and to our hormonal balance and to our children. So each one of you listening has to look into this on your own. It's up to you to try to reduce these chemicals in your body and in your home. Literally almost everything we touch is loaded with chemicals. And this was not the case just a few decades ago, but in the last 50 years, we've become a chemical society. We solve our problems with chemicals. If you have weeds, you spray them. If you have bugs, you spray them. Your food needs a longer shelf life, add chemicals. Gatorade needs not to separate in the bottle so it's prettier on the shelf. Let's add a chemical called BHT, which is a nasty chemical that prevents separation. People want water in plastic bottles. That leaches chemicals. So we've done this, and the rates of depression, anxiety, ADD, thyroid problems, obesity, diabetes, and cancer have skyrocketed. And I'm here to tell you there's a direct link between these chemicals and these hormone and emotional and obesity and diabetes type disorders. There's a direct link there. And you know what? All of these new researchers that are catching on, they all agree. So we must try to cut down these chemicals in our lives. And I have some tips for you on how to do that right after this next break. I'm going to go through the chemicals and what they're in so that you can be aware of them. And then I'm going to give you some great alternative tips so that you can try to eliminate these things as much as possible. You're listening to Get Well Acadiana. I'm Dr. Kevin. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. Thank you for listening today. And today we're discussing chemicals and how it relates to today's worst disease processes. You know, cancer is skyrocketing, hormonal problems, thyroid disorders skyrocketing, attention deficit disorder skyrocketing, autism skyrocketing. So depression, anxiety skyrocketing through the roof. The Internal Organization for Medical Professionals has finally woke up and looked at studies on the exposure to environmental chemicals, and they released some data proving what I've been talking about on this show and on my previous shows and on my Facebook whenever we do Facebook Live. I've been talking about this for a long time, but this group of researchers and physicians were from USA, Canada, England, and also some from the World Health Organization. And this was their quote. Now, this is a different study than I talked about earlier, by the way. This is a different group. And this was their quote. "We are drowning our world in untested and unsafe chemicals, and the price we are paying in terms of our health is of serious concern." The report also stated that 7 million people die every year from chemical exposure. Now, the truth is, guys, it's way more than that. That's way underestimated. Those 7 million people are what they can directly relate to some sort of a chemical exposure, and then the person dies. But if that chemical gives you cancer and you die from cancer, they don't count that. If the chemicals give you obesity and you die from diabetes, that doesn't count. If the chemicals cause thyroid disorders, that doesn't count. So that 7 million is just the ones they can directly relate to the chemical killing them. And the truth is, it's many, many times that. I mean, it might be several times that, because they don't count the diseases that those chemicals cause. They looked at hormone disrupting chemicals, which is the problem with most of these things. Most of these chemicals that we use affect our hormonal balance and our brain balance and cause diabetes and weight problems. Most of these chemicals, the number one thing that they do is they affect our those type of things. You know, they affect our mood, they affect our brain chemistry, they affect our weight, and they affect our hormones. But they looked at just hormone disrupting chemicals, and the cost just in Europe, they estimated was $157 billion a year. The cost to our children in the United States relating to hormone and behavior altering chemicals, they estimated was more than $76 billion in 2008 alone. More importantly than that, though, this is our kids that are suffering with ADD and all these other things, depression and anxiety. You know, I talked about last week, suicide is the third leading cause of death in our young people. And so these hormone and brain disrupting chemicals are a huge problem. There's 188 million pounds of chemicals dumped in our water supply every year. There's 1.4 billion with a B pounds of chemicals dumped in our air every year. And there's 2.8 billion pounds of chemicals dumped on our ground year after year after year. And that's not to mention all the chemicals that are in the toys and the plastics leaching out of water bottles and plastic food containers. And then there's these chemicals in our home like carpets, mattresses, furniture, cleaning supplies, soaps, makeups. So the first chemical that I want to discuss with you, I'm going to tell you some really specific ones to watch out for. The first chemical that I wanted to discuss with you are phthalates. Phthalates are what gives plastic flexibility. It's also found in soaps, shampoos, makeup, plastic, and blood storage bags and medical tubing, believe it or not. Phthalates have been proven to cause thyroid and hormone disruption, obesity, diabetes, and cancer. So if you have too many phthalates in your body, those are the diseases that you're going to cause. And most people are really, really high in phthalates whenever we check them. Now, the next one is BPA. BPA is probably the most prevalent and most destructive chemical that we're dealing with right now. It's also called bisphenol A, but it's abbreviated BPA. BPA is also in plastics, and they also line canned food with this. So that keeps your food from tasting like tin from the can, from the metal in the can. They line it with BPA, and that's been done for decades. It's also in plastics with the number 7 in the triangle. BPA has been proven to cause hormone disruption, thyroid problems, breast and prostate cancer, early onset of puberty in girls. So get this, the average age of puberty in girls a few decades ago was 13. It has now gone down to 9. There's so much BPA that our children are taking in that the girls have, it's actually changed the puberty rate of our children because it mimics estrogen. So you guys have seen these girls. You're like, she's how old already? Wow. And so the reason that's happening, the reason it's changing the puberty age of our children is because it mimics estrogen. It's also been proven to cause diabetes, obesity, ADD, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and other emotional type problems. And you know what? It's everywhere. BPA is absolutely everywhere. It's in a bunch of toys. It's in anything that's plastics, or in most things. Now, the next one is called polybrominated diphenyl ether. Now, you don't have to remember that, but this one's a flame retardant. You know, back in the 80s, they stipulated that all mattresses, furniture, upholstery, all that stuff had to be coated with this flame retardant chemical so that it would burn less easily. It's also in electronics. It's been known to cause thyroid problems, estrogen problems, learning problems, ADD, fatigue, and brain fog. And then the last one I wanted to go through so I wanted to give you kind of the 4 top ones. The last one is perfluorinated chemicals. These are in everything. These are your stain resistors. So what they do is they resist or they keep out grease, water, and stains. Teflon is an example. So your Teflon nonstick pan that you use in the kitchen that has chips in it, where the Teflon is coming loose, that's putting perfluorinated chemicals into your food every time you cook. Throw it away. Get one of those new non-toxic organic pans. You get them at Target, you get them anywhere. But they're coated with a non-toxic, non-stick coating, and they work really well. Now, also, perfluorinated chemicals are found in fast food wrappers. The reason your grease from your taco doesn't get through the wrapper and end up in the bag is because the wrapper is lined with perfluorinated chemicals. Also, this is found in microwave popcorn, and it's proven to cause obesity, birth weight problems, thyroid dysfunctions, cancer, hormone disruption, and mental disorders. I'll give you an example of how you might get exposed to this this Teflon or these perfluorinated chemicals. You know, I was buying a couch not too long ago, and as I was checking out, the salesman asked me if I had children. And I said, yeah, I have a 6-year-old. Yeah, I have a little boy. He's 6. He said, oh, I have this special coating that can prevent stains on your new couch. So I said, what is it? Oh, it's this special Teflon spray that we spread all over the whole couch. And so I said, no, thanks. So he was checking me out, and he continued, and he said, well, listen, you have a 6-year-old son. You know, this coating is such a good thing. If he spills anything on it, you can just wipe it right off. It can prevent stains and prevent that from ruining your new couch. I said, no, thanks. So a little while later, as we were loading up, the manager walks over there to me, and he said, hey, listen, you know, there's this coating, and I know the salesman went over it with you, but you really need to get this coating put on your couch. And I know he told me you had a 6-year-old, and he just kept going on and on about this coating. And I said, no, thanks, probably a little more sternly the third time. And finally, he just kind of threw his hands down, and he said, well, why not? So then for the next 5 or 10 minutes, I proceeded to tell him all the negative effects that these perfluorinated chemicals had on the developing brains and children's behavior and cognitive issues. He probably wishes he would have stayed in his office, but most people would have just said, yeah, sure, I do need that. Spray that Teflon, spray this hormone disrupting chemical all over my couch so my little boy can go play on that. My son would have literally been playing in a chemical that has major destructive effects on his health. But this is how easy we're exposed to these chemicals, and we don't even realize it. Now, another major hidden danger for children are in their toys. So their children's toys are made out of plastic, and most of those toys, probably 90 or 199% of them, come from China. And they've also been proven to have lead paint on top of plastic. So this toys are so toxic for our children. The Consumer Product Safety Commission, who's in charge of keeping dangerous products off the market, but does that mean that they test these toys for safety before they put them on the market? Absolutely not. This commission is completely reactive, meaning somebody has to file a complaint, and then after the complaint's filed, an investigation ensues, and then they can suggest a recall so it's complaint driven. It's completely reactionary. Now, these toxins from these toys build up in our children over time, and it's not like a choking hazard. So since the Product Safety Commission's reactionary, you know, a choking hazard gets found right away. But these chemicals build up. They're 20 years old by the time it starts to affect them. So it just never really gets paid attention to. So basically, there's no oversight in what your child's toys are made out of, or may be coated with, or what chemicals they're made from, or what the paint has in it. These cheap toys from China and other countries are emitting toxins into your child every day, and these toxins build up and are causing them health problems later on in life. And I want parents to be aware of this and pay attention to this. Now, you simply can't avoid toys from China, especially if your child's ever going to have anything to play with, but we can reduce it significantly. And a lot of press was made over lead in the paint a few years ago on these toys, and people probably thought, well, that problem's been solved. Well, think again. There is no comprehensive ban on lead in toys in the United States. And lead causes damage to a child's central nervous system, which, by the way, central nervous system is their emotions, their thoughts, their attention, their behavior. That's their brain. So what that means is that this paint, it's illegal to paint toys with paint containing more than 0.06% lead. Recently, Mattel recalled toys that were had lead in it that was 11%. That's 180 times the legal limit. You know, speaking of toys, I was looking at one of my son's fidget spinners the other day, and the paint was chipping off of it, and it was a real shiny paint, and it looked a little bit toxic, like it's probably suspicious. It's from China, of course. I put that one aside, put that one in the drawer, kind of hid that one. I mean, he's got 10 of those things. He's not going to miss one of them, but likely that paint chipping off of there was toxic, and he has a tendency to put his hands in his mouth like all kids, or, you know, put the fidget spinners or put their toys in their mouth. The kids that I work with concentration, mental, and behavioral problems, we always test them for leads and heavy metals and chemicals and different toxins. And the things that we find, the high levels that we find in these kids, it's startling. Now, another thing to be aware of with toys while we're on this subject, or with children, be aware of sometimes little girls wear this cheap metal costume jewelry like bracelets and earrings. Many times these things contain high levels of lead or cadmium or other toxic metals. So be careful from this jewelry that comes out of, like, one of the quarter operated machines at the front of the store. They looked at rings and bracelets of these cheap costume jewelry for like little girls or little kids. One study, 70% of it contained illegal levels of lead, cadmium, or other heavy metals. 70% of that stuff is toxic, and it soaks into your children's skin. Plus, they put things in their mouth. So here's the best thing we can do. You're not going to eliminate these things altogether. Before I had a son, I used to tell people, don't let your kids put toys in their mouth, and, don't give them plastic toys made from China. And then I had a child, and I realized that's pretty much impossible. So we do our very best to reduce or eliminate it as much as we possibly can. I shoot for 70, 80% reduction so I don't drive myself crazy. My little boy has known since he was a little bitty baby that every time he gets a new toy, it gets a bath first. So he would get a toy and he would say, "Dad, give him a bath so I can play with him." And so we would we would wash his toys in a non-toxic cleaner very, very well, make sure the paint was on there good, nothing was going to come off before he would ever get them. If he got a new stuffed animal, it would go in the washer first for its bath, and then it would go outside to dry. So, parents can make a difference. So you'll see parents that'll open a new toy and just open that out of the package and hand it to their kid. The kid grabs it, puts it right in their mouth. That's the highest level of toxin they could possibly be exposed to. So we can eliminate these things and still give our kids something to play with. Now, we're going to discuss how to decrease these toxins in our food when we get back from this break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Bryant Wellness Institutes. And if we're talking toxins today and chemical toxins in your life on the show, and if you think that you or your children might be having some of these kind of problems based on these toxins, we can test them. We do hair analysis and we do heavy metal urine tests. We have all kinds of tests to see what the toxic level of either your child that's having some emotional or concentration problems, or maybe you having depression, anxiety type problems. We can test you for all this, and we have solutions, and we have ways of getting this stuff out of your body. But the truth is that the health problems from all of these chemicals are probably the biggest health challenge over the next 20 or 30 years. Now, you guys have heard me talk a lot about processed foods, and sometimes I don't think that sinks in either. Whenever I talk about processed foods and why it's important to avoid something that's processed foods that's in a package. Well, first of all, processed foods are completely void of any phytonutrients or minerals or anything that your body needs to be healthy. So they're basically empty calories. But also they're loaded with things that aren't good for us. So I wanted to explain myself a little bit and give you one simple example whenever I say processed foods, so that you can kind of get what I mean. And I'm wanting you guys today to understand the importance of some of these things that I talk about on the show. So sometimes I say, well, yeah, avoid processed foods, and that kind of goes over your head. I'll say avoid chemicals in your environment, and you don't get it. So today's show, I'm just trying to get you to realize the importance and what I actually mean by some of these things I always talk about. So let's just take a simple package of Fig Newtons. Now, which most people would consider a pretty healthy snack. I mean, the package on the front in huge letters, it says made with whole grains. And also on the front of the package, it says made with real fruit. And it has a big green leaf on it and a beautiful purple fig on the front of the package. And it says a good source of fiber. All this is on the front of the package. So this must be healthy for us, right? They've gone to every conceivable measure to convey that this is a healthy food. It says fiber and whole grains and made with fruit. Well, let's break down the ingredients list real quick, and I'll go item by item, and we'll see what's actually in the food. Now, the first one on the list is whole grain wheat flour. Don't let the whole grain label fool you into believing that it's healthy. One serving only contains 3 grams of fiber, and most of that is actually fake soluble corn fiber, which does nothing in your body. Now, the next ingredient is figs, which are probably loaded with pesticides and very much loaded with sugar. And the next ingredient is sugar. So just eating 2 fig Newtons, you're going to get 13 grams of sugar. That's more than 3 teaspoons full. Now, how many of you actually only eat 2? Nobody, right? We eat like at least 6. That's 39 grams of sugar right there. Next on the list is high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup has been such a detriment to so many people's health in America. High fructose corn syrup is so bad for us. It's a chemically refined sugar that has been shown to cause more weight gain than regular sugar. It's said to be a major cause of heart disease, cancer, dementia, and liver problems. Some high fructose corn syrup is processed and contains mercury. High fructose corn syrup has also been thought to affect the satisfaction center of our brain stems. So it kind of turns that satisfaction center off. So we have a tendency to just eat more and more and more and more. Now, next on the list is soybean oil. This cheap oil is very high in inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids. So this is the inflammatory fats, not the healthy fats. Your healthy fats are your omega-3s like olive oils and coconut oils. Soybean oil is the unhealthy inflammatory omega-6 oil. It causes inflammation in your body, and inflammation is the precursor to almost every chronic disease, including heart disease and cancer. Now, next on the list, and this is a pet peeve of mine, is partially hydrogenated cottonseed oil. This shouldn't be a food item at all. Guys, cotton is a textile. It's not a food. Cotton is for making t-shirts. Cottonseed oil is the cheapest of all oils, and that's why it's in everything. Cotton crops are not regulated by the FDA like food crops are. They're regulated by the EPA. Cotton is known as the dirtiest of all crops. They spray nasty chemicals never meant for food, and then they partially hydrogenate it, meaning they turn it into trans fat, which is just the worst of the worst. It'll clog your arteries, it'll cause heart disease faster than anything. Cottonseed oil should never have been put in our food supply, but it's super cheap. It's a byproduct of making t-shirts, so why not put it in food, right? The next is sodium benzoate. This is a chemical preservative found in many, many processed foods. The Mayo Clinic found that it causes many problems, including hyperactivity in children, and it's especially dangerous when mixed with vitamin C. So if you take sodium benzoate and mix it with vitamin C, it becomes extremely toxic. What do figs contain? Figs have tons of vitamin C. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them, but the last one I wanted to talk to you about is vanillin, which is meant to sound like vanilla. But don't be confused by this. It's not extracted from the vanilla bean. Vanillin is made from the petrochemical glycol, a byproduct of creosote, which is what they coat telephone poles and railroad cross ties with. But it tastes kind of like vanilla, and it's super cheap, and it's in your fig Newtons, and it's actually creosote you're eating. So that's what they coat telephone poles with. Yeah. So it's called vanillin. And it goes without mentioning that almost all of those ingredients are genetically modified and contain pesticides and probably have Roundup in them. And guys, remember the front of the package? It was the picture of health. It had a green leaf and high fiber, made with real fruit, made with whole grains, beautiful picture of a fig on the front. Listen, I'm not trying to pick on fig Newtons because most processed foods are worse than that. But I want you guys to understand, if something comes in a package, it's dead food that's void of nutrients, has all kinds of unhealthy ingredients. It's very inflammatory, and inflammation is the precursor to almost all chronic diseases. Inflammation is where cancer comes from. It's where heart disease comes from. It's where plaquing in your arteries comes from. So we got to do better. Now, I wanted to talk to you about a book out there on this subject called The Dorito Effect. This is fascinating. In this book, it talks about how skewed our palates are, our taste, how skewed our tastes are, and why we crave foods that are so different now from what we used to just a few decades ago. And here's the bottom line with this book, and this is so fascinating. Our internal body has lost the ability to crave the nutrition that we are short of, starting way back in our hunter-gatherer days. So back in our hunter-gatherer days, if we were short of calcium, we would crave and seek out bone products. If we were short of protein, we would crave meats. If we were short of vitamin C, we would crave and seek out a bush full of berries. Our cravings were critical to us seeking out the foods that contained the nutrition that our bodies were short of. So there was a pediatrician named Dr. Clara Davis that did a remarkable study in the early 1900s. It had to be back then because you could never do this to kids today. But here's what she did. She took 15 foster kids she was raising, and she gave them access to 34 foods, including things like water, beef, corn, apples, milk, and cabbage, etc. Now, amazingly, on these 34 kids, she never encouraged them to eat anything. They could choose any item they wanted at any time they wanted without influence from commercials or adults in any way. And remarkably, the children chose what nutrition they needed by taste. One child with rickets chose on their own to drink cod liver oil without encouragement until he was cured. Now, if you've ever tasted cod liver oil, you know it's one of the worst tasting things on the planet. And so this child chose to drink that because he had rickets, which is a vitamin shortage. So there's a natural way our bodies crave foods that contain the nutrition that we need. Now, before 1950, there was really no such thing as flavorings in our food. Things tasted how they were supposed to taste. So the food nutrition matched the flavor of the food you were eating. Now, over the last 70 years, we have so focused on producing higher yield foods and pesticide-resistant foods that our food supply has lost much of its natural flavor. You know, a chicken now has been designed to grow so fast and big that flavor really wasn't in the consideration. A chicken has been genetically altered to grow at an astounding rate. In fact, if this were a human, a 6-pound baby would weigh 600 pounds by the time it was 2 months old. A chicken goes from born to ready to kill and eat in 48 days. I call them Franken chickens. They can't even walk many times. They have to just kind of sit there. They have trouble walking. They grow so fast. A lot of times their legs can't even support them. This is how bad we have altered the natural growth of our foods. But it tastes like cardboard. So what do? They add flavorings. So if look at your ingredients list next time you go buy chicken, it's injected with natural flavorings. It's added to everything. So flavorings were originally developed in the 50s and added to tortilla chips to make Doritos. And then shortly after, it was added to more junk food, and then they added it to drinks, and now it's in almost everything. These artificial flavors mimic the flavors in nature, and we've chemically imprinted cravings onto food that aren't the real food. This is fooling our bodies into believing that we're getting nutrition, but the nutrition never comes because they're artificial flavorings. So our cravings won't stop, and we eat and we eat and we eat. So listen to this. We're getting the strawberry experience, but we're not getting the strawberry nutrition. And this has skewed our body's natural mechanism for judging our nutritional needs. So all of these flavorings addict us to eat more and more food, and we're getting less and less nutrition. We're eating more food than ever, and we're starving our bodies all at the same time. Hence the title of the book, The Dorito Effect. Our body assumes that if we taste fruit, we're getting the nutrition of fruit, but we're not. We're getting junk food. Now, it's very possible, and I think it's likely, that this is a huge factor in America's obesity problem. We are all now victims of the Dorito effect. You're listening to Get Well Acadiana. I'm Dr. Kevin. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Bryant Wellness Institutes. If you're interested in checking to see if you may have toxic buildup is causing your hormonal imbalance or your thyroid problems or your child's emotional or behavioral or attention problems, just contact me. I'll show you what we need to do that. You can call me at the office at 837-7174. If you want, you can call right now and leave your name on the machine. And when I get to the office, obviously I'm not there on Saturday. When I get into the office Monday, I'll personally call you back to talk to you about how we can tell if these things are affecting your health or affecting your children's health. But on today's show, I've been trying to get you to understand that we are harming ourselves with all of these environmental chemicals and genetically modified foods and flavorings. We have to get back to the basics. We have to begin to eat real food again. So in this last segment, I'm going to give you some tips and solutions to what I've been talking about today. Now, the first thing I can tell you is just eat real food. Go to the farmer's market. Buy the more expensive tomatoes. They taste better. You know, we're cheapskates whenever it comes to our food. We'll buy the designer jeans. We'll buy the iPhone 7. We'll buy the nicer car. But when it comes to our food, we're cheapskates. We think it ought to be as cheap as possible. You can feed a whole carload of people at the drive-thru for $10. But is that your best option? It's not. It's dead food. It's empty calories. I hear people complain about the cost of organic food, and it does cost a little bit more. But if you realized what it actually took to grow organic food and how inexpensive they're actually able to keep it, the trade-off is worth it. Guys, it is not easy to grow something completely organic without pesticides and chemicals. I tell my patients all the time, you can either spend a little bit at the a little bit extra at the grocery store, or you could spend a whole lot at Lady Lord's Hospital. You pick, which one are you going to do? Which would you rather do? Don't be a cheapskate whenever it comes to your food. Spend the extra money. This is the fuel for your life. This is the fuel for your body, for your life. This is what's going to fuel your health. Now, I will give you this tip because I do realize some of you might be on a tight food budget, and that's okay. If you're not able to buy everything organic, that's okay too. You can do a Google search for something called the Dirty Dozen, the top 12 foods to buy organic, and at least buy those. I'll give you an example. Bananas, it doesn't matter. They're not sprayed much. They have a thick skin. Avocados, the same thing. They have a thick skin. They're not sprayed that much. It's not that important. They're not really high in pesticides. But blueberries, very important. I try to eat at least a cup of blueberries a day, but organic blueberries. Blueberries are very important. They're highly sprayed. They're highly toxic. Strawberries, very, very important. So if you've ever bought strawberries and they had that fuzz on them in just a few days and you had to throw them away, if they didn't coat strawberries with very, very high levels of antifungal chemicals, they would actually spoil before they even get in the truck to the grocery store. So strawberries and blueberries are very important. Apples, very, very important to buy apples organic. A regular apple, or apples have that divot at the top where the stem goes. Now, I have pictures of them spraying apple orchards. The guy's in a full hazmat suit with a respirator, just coating apples with chemicals from what looks like a car wash sprayer. And when they spray this pesticide on it, that little divot in the top of the apple where the stem is, that fills up with pesticide. And the pesticide sits there, and it just slowly soaks into the entire apple and around all the skin. Now, once they pick the apple, they coat it with carnauba wax, which is what you wax your car with, so that it looks nice and shiny and pretty on the shelf. So they literally seal that pesticide into that apple, and it cannot be washed off. I don't care how many times you wash it, it can't be washed off. So apples are on the list. So if you look at an organic apple, they're dull and ugly and blemished. They're not shiny. That's because they're not coated with car wax, and they're not full of pesticides. But they're so much better for you. So at least get these top 12 foods to buy organic. You can do a Google list, and I tell you what, I'll even post it on our Facebook page later. It's at the Bryant Wellness Institute's Facebook page. I'll get that list and post it on there a little bit later today. But at least spend the money on those top 12 most important organic foods. Try to avoid using chemicals around your home. Use non-toxic cleaners around your kitchen and around your children. Avoid these toxic air fresheners. We want the house to smell good, so we spray these chemicals. That's pure chemical that you're spraying. So you can use some essential oils in a little burner or something that's a lot better. Wash your children's toys before you give it to them always. Oh, I'll give you a good one. Avoid these antibacterial soaps. They contain a chemical called triclosan. Everyone should be aware of this chemical. It also goes by the name Microban. It's used in school supplies, antibacterial cutting boards. It's also used in soaps and all this antibacterial stuff that we've been using. Guys, all this antibacterial stuff has made us sicker, and it's promoted the development of antibacterial-resistant bacteria or antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So avoid this triclosan and Microban chemicals. They've proven to cause thyroid problems, hormone problems, infertility, obesity, and many other hormone-related diseases. And yes, they're actually putting Microban chemical in school supplies because they want everything as antibacterial as possible for our children, and that's a mistake. I would rather my son be exposed to germs than chemicals. Your body can deal with germs. That can make his immune system stronger. The body's immune system gets stronger by killing things. It gets weaker when something else kills it for them. Also, read your ingredients list. If you don't know how to pronounce it, or if you don't know what it is, your body's probably not going to know what it is either, and it's probably not going to be very good for you. Get rid of your Teflon-coated cookware. Buy these new organic pans. They're non-toxic. They're great. Nothing sticks to them. You don't even need oil. They're great. But just be aware of all of these things. Do everything you possibly can to try to reduce using chemicals around your home. Whenever I have weeds, I start my my torch, my little butane torch, and just burn them. I don't have to spray chemicals. At my house, I have the exterminator spray a barrier around the outside, but I do not let him spray inside my house. Keep in mind, these chemicals build up in our body over our lifetime. They won't make you sick today. And you know, sometimes you always have that one guy that goes, well, I've been spraying that. It hadn't made me sick. But I'm telling you, they build up in your body and they affect your hormonal system. They have an effect on your mood. They have an effect on your brain's chemistry and cause things like diabetes and obesity. So just because these things don't make you sick right away doesn't mean that you could just ignore them and they're not important. So where do you think all of these hormone problems are coming from? So we used to not know anybody that had thyroid problems. Now I guarantee you everybody listening knows somebody that has a thyroid problem. Where do you think all this attention deficit disorder and depression and anxiety and autism and all these things are coming from? All these neuroemotional type disorders. So the first step for this, guys, is just to be aware that this is happening. We've got to get back to the basics. Eat real food that comes out of the ground that's not been sprayed with chemicals. You know, you take all these genetically modified soybeans. So what they did was they took a soybean, and what we think, because this is proprietary, but what we think is that they spliced a bacteria DNA onto one side of the genetic structure of a soybean. So you have part soybean, part bacteria. And then on the other end of the genetic structure, they spliced on part of a virus. So it's not, and the reason they did that is so you can spray more Roundup on it and it won't kill it. So you have part soybean, part virus, part bacteria, so we can spray more chemicals on it and it won't kill it, called Roundup Ready. And if it comes in a package, it's probably not good for you. Eat real food that comes from the ground, leafy greens, organic chickens, grass-fed organic beefs. Your body will function so much better if you do this. So try not to be a cheapskate when it comes to your food. This is the fuel for your life. This is the fuel for your future. You know, people will pump premium gas in their car and then go complain because something's a little more expensive for their body. Your body's so much more important than your car. And so your bodies will do better from whatever you put in it. So put better stuff in it. Thank you for joining me today. This has been another edition of Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope that this will make more sense in the future when I say try to reduce these chemicals in your environment and try to reduce these chemicals in your house and around your children, how important this actually is. And you know what? I could have talked another 3 hours of giving you examples of how we're just literally bombarded by chemicals And these chemicals are affecting our hormonal balance. They're affecting our thyroid, our heart, our diabetes. They're affecting our weight. And our liver has to filter all these things out of our body. And that's why you get these diagnoses like you hear people say now they have fatty liver. Do you know fatty liver is literally cirrhosis of the liver from somebody that's not an alcoholic? What do you think's causing all this cirrhosis of the liver? What's causing that damage? These chemicals are what's causing that damage. So in our liver health program, the first step is to rebuild the liver. And with our functional medicine wellness programs, taking care of the liver, because everyone's liver is so overwhelmed, is one of the things that we do. So if you're interested in talking to me a little bit more about one of these programs, just call my office and leave your name on my message on my machine. And when I get back to work Monday, I'll give you a call personally. I will be the one calling you to talk to you about this. My number is 837-7174. That's 837-7174. If you want to give me a call, I'll call you back Monday. If you have kids with some of these problems, or you're having hormonal problems or diabetes, and you want to figure out if we can fix it, just give me a call and we'll discuss it. Thank you guys for joining me. This has been Get Well Acadiana. I'm Dr. Kevin, Senior Vice President of the Bryant Wellness Institutes. Have a great day.